Hi, welcome to this episode. My guest today is Ethan Perlstein. He is a founder and CEO of Curetopia, and he is on a mission to end rare genetic diseases. This conversation took me by surprise. I didn't know where it was going to go at the beginning, but we went through some crazy places like blockchain and Web3. And I think what you're going to learn is that Ethan is not just a business builder, investor, and scientist, and even a doctor of philosophy, but he is a very heart-centered and driven person who is looking to solve solutions for people who have rare genetic disease. So I'm looking forward to sharing this episode with you, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Hi, Ethan. Thank you for joining me today. It was a great surprise to see see that you'd signed up for the call today. So yeah, welcome. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about you and Curetopia.
Yeah, eager to be here. That's why I grabbed the first available spot.
All right, so fill me in. What's brought you to this point in your life where I love your hat, by the way, make biotech great again.
You got to embrace the formula. It's not going anywhere. So you can make it your own.
Awesome. Okay, let's hear your story.
Well, I'm a scientist, a builder, and an investor. And it's taken me a while to accumulate all of those experiences. And it was in that order, but I still remain a scientist. And I have been inspired and captured by a cause for over a decade now. And this is the cause of rare diseases. And specifically, the call to action is to end rare diseases. And it can get more into the story of rare diseases, but unfortunately, the problem starts at the very beginning with the name, because you hear the word rare and you immediately turn off some parts of your brain and turn off others. Maybe turn on parts of your heart instead of parts of
Mm-hmm.
your brain. Maybe you just assume that rare means charitable or humanitarian, or just simply not something that is going to affect you or
Or
the average person.
or
But it's such
newly discovered too, diseases that we've never heard of or haven't surfaced in large quantities, right?
Totally. And now that we can surface all of these mutations in genomes, where we've uncovered now 10,000 plus rare diseases. When I started
Wow.
out in this space about a decade ago, it was the number had just bumped from 5,000 to 7,000.
So
And,
double.
what is the upper limit? I don't know. This is not the type of inflation you want to be seeing, but there is a lot of surface area to the human genome that is vulnerable to these genetic lightning strikes. And that's kind of the story of rare diseases, is that they're not actually rare. They're actually really freaking common. And in totality, rare diseases affect more people than cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's combined in a given year. But people only hear about the common diseases because that's where
Right.
the money can be made. So I got called into this holy war because I encountered a parent one fateful day, and it was in DC in Bethesda, actually, at the National Institutes of Health, and it was on a day that I now know, but before did not, called Rare Disease Day. Which I don't know if you know what Rare Disease Day was. It just
No.
passed. That's the hint. Well, it's the logic is, let's pick the rarest day in the year, which I guess they thought would be the last day of February, which of course every 4 years is a new day.
It's only every
um,
4 years. Yeah, that'd be pretty
but
rare.
yeah, so it's sort of like, yeah, let's double down on how niche we are, guys. Let's see how effective that is as brand marketing. And surprise, it's not. So anyway, I
Did they
met
actually pick
this.
February 29th is the day?
Well, it's February 28th, but yes,
Oh,
on
okay.
a
It is
leap
the last
year,
day of
it
February.
will.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that would have been just completely. I wasn't trying to make a joke there, but
Okay.
in
Okay.
any case, I'm just trying to grasp at reasons why this was thought was a good marketing ploy. But I'm referencing it because I met this mom at Rare Disease Day in 2013, and I was just amazed that I was talking to someone who sounded like a scientist to me, but was very, very, very focused on their child's. She had twin daughters at the time who were affected by this fatal rare disease. They have since passed on, but this mom ended up just moving mountains and doing things that she started her journey back in 2006, early internet days, pre-social media even, and
Hmm.
was able to rally information online and was just able to become a scientist and studied. And I just thought, wow. Uh, I mean, on the one hand, this is terrible that a parent has to be sort of forced to do this because the establishment and the experts actually don't know what to do, or doctors only seen this rare disease once in their career, or
Right.
so I realized in the light bulb moment that this was a repeatable thing, that some of these parents are going to essentially unleash their inner entrepreneur, and they were
Right.
going to make their life's work this solving their kid's disease, saving their kid's life. And I was just obviously so inspired by that. And I decided I needed to work arm in arm with such parents. So that's kind of the genesis of my story. And that's why, Curetopia will make sense when I explain it. But yeah, everything comes back to that one light bulb moment and realizing I need to partner with these incredible families that are moving mountains and proving the establishment wrong.
Right. And possibly their passion, obviously the drive behind why they're diving into that scientific world. Plus they also don't have any blinders on that perhaps get established
100%.
as you become involved in a certain industry or area of interest, but they're going in it with a completely different perspective. Like they're laser focused on trying to save their child's life. So you can imagine how they don't see the same obstacles. They're moving beyond them. That's really interesting that that's been your motivation. And so that led to Curetopia. Then that's
Well, there was some steps in between because
okay.
that fateful meeting was in 2013. So there were some steps in
Right.
between.
Okay. Of course. Right.
So kind of the first step was to create the world's first biotech PBC, or public benefit corporation. And so I created Perlara, and that was in 2014, and it's still a going concern. It has evolved and taken many shapes, as startups do if they survive.
Right.
And but its corporate DNA was inscribed with this public benefit corporation ethos. And
Right.
what did that mean, though? What did it actually mean in
Yeah.
practice? So I
Yeah.
ran the PBC experiment at Perlara for a better part of a decade, and had several major learnings. But one of the major learnings was there was going to be there was going to be difficulty really achieving scale and leveling the playing field of access. So it wasn't just the wealthiest and savviest families.
Right.
Running the Perlar experiment proved that inevitably you were going to end up partnering with families who had some amount of means and sophistication, because they're the ones that sort of select themselves for the ability to do this research, the ability to take no for an answer, the ability to not listen to experts to become the
Right.
expert. Those are very unique traits. But at the end of the day, you sort of have this selection bias. And so I ultimately decided that Prolara needs to focus on metabolic diseases, and we have a strategy for how we're going to do that. But then there needed to be some way to realize that original vision of a public benefit community, let's say, if we want to take a Web3 um, lens. And could that same mission of working with families and communities and driving forward research, could that happen in a new type of vehicle, one where economic incentives and participation incentives and rewards and risk are all shared and benefited from, you know, by mostly by the patients who are directly uh, guiding the research, sometimes by providing the samples that makes the research possible, by granting data access that allows research to make insights. So I thought the only real way to make a scalable level playing field solution for rare diseases that's also global in view, not just focused on elite families in America or in developed countries,
Mm-hmm.
I realized I think we have to embrace blockchain. I think we have to embrace
Mm.
this technology, both for financing, for as sort of the contractual layer, so we could have smart contracts that build in provisions that can't be skirted or avoided, or feet can't be dragged by various types of stakeholders in the trad bio world. So there just were a lot of compelling reasons why I thought it's time to build biotech on chain natively. And so everything about the biotech process, which we know fully well in the off-chain world, could we now start to migrate bit by bit, starting with IP, starting with other forms of contracts that govern data sharing and participation in clinical studies, and then governance by the community, getting feedback and getting approval for decisions about research directions and monetization strategies and so forth. So long story short, I think it's not just I'm not just into Web3 and DeSci now because it's popular. Because actually, it's
Right.
it's not necessarily we're going through this kind of weird period through crypto now. We're doing this because there's a real reason to build on this
Yeah.
fresh canvas.
It's interesting, and because I mean, if you're thinking about this, are you finding, or originally, did you find a lot of obstacles to moving into that blockchain world with biotech, or like, like rules, regulations, navigating that space, or did you kind of find a lot of hurdles in your path?
Well, in the past, right in Perlara, for example, it never had to worry about crypto because it
Right.
didn't, we didn't take payments in crypto. So the crypto world didn't, DeFi, all of that didn't, is completely separate from what we did as a biotech company. And I would say that almost 100% of biotech therapeutics companies, platforms are in the same boat where up until, say, now, there was no utility function of crypto other than maybe on some kind of DeFi or financialization side.
Hmm.
There was no benefit seen, or there was no implementation of smart contracts. It's just not something people think about doing in trad bio.
Right. 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 So then now you've so Curetopia operates entirely in this on that in the Web3 and blockchain. That's very interesting. Is Curetopia unique to other companies, or is there anybody else trying to work this space, or what?
Well, there are other bio DAOs, biotech decentralized autonomous organizations,
Mm-hmm.
and they are doing amazing things. Athena DAO is focused on women's health. Vita DAO is focused on longevity. You've got a number of other, fill in the blank DAOs with their science focus, and it spans truly everything from cryopreservation to programmable fungi and hair loss prevention and
Mm,
focusing on particular types of therapeutic modalities like peptides. Like it goes on and on, right? It's endless. There's this imminent explosion of biodAOs that's coming, and so Curetopia is part of that. I would say that what differentiates us are several things. I guess one is we do have a focus on rare diseases in a way I think that other groups don't. There are other groups interested, I think, in healthcare and in decentralized clinical trials and so forth, but we really are exclusively focused on rare diseases and are truly disease agnostic. I would say also, I have a track record and experience coming from the quote unquote trad bio world. So, I'm not just a weekend hobbyist scientist. No offense to any
right.
of those. I wasn't just like a DeFi trader who was, watching YouTube videos about biotech and then deciding to launch a community or a Discord. Like, no offense to all of those folks and to any who have kind of entered DeFi that way, but I'm coming at it from having run and started two biotech companies, and taken an asset from inception to phase three. The phase three didn't work, but we did it for only $5 million, which is a fraction of the cost to getting to that no. And the learnings we learned are already being recycled into our next program. So we know how to be super super capital efficient. We know how to execute, and I think a lot of other teams out there in DeSci, I think there's more, frankly, I think there could be seen as more execution risk. But with me and Prolara and my experience at Prolara, what I bring to Curetopia is, 12 years of operator, investor, and scientist experience in the trenches, and actually have moved things in the real world in the clinic. So I hope that differentiates us, and I hope it attracts other founders like me from the TradBio world who never would have maybe thought twice about crypto or Web3, but now might be thinking, huh, this could start out as a way where I get access to funding, and then maybe from there it's sort of a gateway into the full sort of Web3 community experience. But it's going to be one step at a time.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, you're a bit of a triple threat with these three areas that you're diving into, which is really cool. And I mean, no, I'm sure you're having your set of challenges. What are you? What's your biggest challenge right now? What are you trying to get? What hurdle are you passing through right now?
I think, if I'm being totally level with you and the audience and listeners out there, this is my first sort of crypto community project company, biotech, and I'm still learning what it means to interact with a Web3 native community
Right.
and learning what it means like to participate with a very diverse and sometimes boisterous and opinionated group of individuals, most of whom are by design um, and are totally embraced for this, are pseudonymous or anonymous. And so getting used to that culture of interacting with this community versus if you're running a trad bio startup and you have a relatively simple cap table. Even if you have a party round, you may only have a few large investors that you sort of need to keep apprised of things
Right.
for major governance issues. And then otherwise, you're sort of not really tending to them. And a lot of really seasoned investors know not to sort of kind of like, keep asking, how's it going? How's it going? And so I get it. It's a different culture in Web3, and you do have to open yourself up to that level of transparency and responsiveness. But then it's also like, okay, I get that. I got to get acclimated to this. But yeah, at some point, there's
Yeah.
also going to
Yeah.
have to be some boundaries set here, where it's like, research takes some time. I know you want
Hmm.
to hear something every day, and that you sometimes you might interpret silence for something bad, but we're not gonna, we're gonna try to fill a lot of content out there about Curetopia's mission, our science, rare stories. We're going to highlight a lot of personal rare disease hero
Right.
stories, so people really understand why we're doing this. At the end of the day, it's not just science and this, like, we're not just robots here. So we plan on definitely filling the space with a lot of positive content, but also people have to realize biotech takes time. We're going to move a lot
Hmm.
faster than traditional biotech, but it's still going to
Right.
take some time. So the biggest challenge for me now is just learning the rules and the rhythms of interacting with a Web3 native community.
Right. And you're actually probably you got one foot in each world too, right? Because you have your roots are, you're trying to drive roots into Web3 and the blockchain area, but you still actually need a presence on Web2, because how are people going to learn of your brand? Because that's where more people are primarily spending their time, right? Particularly parents who have children with rare diseases who are doing research. They're looking for information on. A lot of people don't even know what Web3 is anymore yet.
It's true. No, and
It's
for
it's
yeah,
it's still
a
new
lot
to
of
a lot of people,
families
right?
are still on
Yeah.
Facebook groups. They're
Yeah,
still in private
exactly.
Facebook groups, or they're in their own kind of WhatsApp groups that are completely kind
Yeah.
of invisible to other
Yeah.
people. So yeah, there's a lot of fragmentation. But I think ultimately we found a lot of community and cohesion on X, on Twitter,
Right.
and on Telegram as well. And between those two spaces, I think we have over 800. Curetopia has over 800 members in the Telegram group, and
Well,
I
that's
think,
good. Yeah.
yeah, close to 4,500 followers on X. So I think there's a decent sized community there, and there's a lot of people hungry for updates. And there's a lot of internal champions. I can see people who are spontaneously just like saying, congrats on this or good job with this, and just saying we got your back. And so it's good to be reminded that when you build in Web3 like this, you can't be everywhere, but at least on X and Telegram,
Right.
people can see each other,
Right.
and they can see the positive, they can feel the positive sentiments.
That's right. It's kind of the bridge between the gap, right? Right. You've kind of been focusing your energy then in that channel of communications is on X. What else are you doing? How else are you reaching your getting your message out?
So I'm part of the things I've been doing now that the auction's closed, and now starting to put together a team of consultants because I want to operate super lean, but I'm going to bring on a marketing team and some storyteller and some community manager support. So there's going to be some folks who are going to be joining me soon. And I think we're going to probably hit, we're going to try to hit is I think you have to be just like your sort of multi-chain or poly-chain. You have to be multi-channel when it comes to content distribution. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of use X and Telegram as shorthand, but I think, we envision cross posting on Insta and, I haven't sort of come up with a TikTok plan, but definitely want to engage folks that are native to that audience and likely going to need to have like platform native marketers, right? Who
Right.
also get
Absolutely.
Web3.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I want to kind of keep marketing to a reasonable amount because I want to balance, filling the silence, but also like I don't want, those are dollars that could be spent on research.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I need
Yeah.
to
For
balance
sure.
that stuff. And but yeah, I'm excited that we can hopefully be cross channel posting a bunch soon. And I think hitting on, like I said, three pillars: the mission of Curetopia, the science of Curetopia, meaning even like I don't know if you've seen Pump Dot Science when they are looking at molecules that extend lifespan in worms or flies or mice. They actually have the mice live on the rotorod, and
Oh,
and you're
wow.
doing a
Really?
live stream watching. Yeah. So,
Wow.
you can imagine that there's ways where it's still X or it's a live stream, but you can show people science, right, in real
Right.
time. And you can, so
Right.
I'm definitely hopeful that Curetopia can establish like a lab meeting culture where we say, here's some results. Obviously some things we kind of don't disclose in an open environment because there's IP concerns, but when it comes to a lot of stuff, we can just share results and get feedback. And so I want
Sure.
to, promote that. And then we want to promote the third pillar, which is rare stories. Like really personalizing who are these kids, their families, what do they have to go through, where do they live, what's their day to day, what's the glimpse
No,
of their
no.
day. And hopefully there's a lot of vlogging and yeah, we want to have as much video, I think, in these
Yeah.
posts to keep engagement high quality.
Well, I think you talking about the case studies or the rare studies. I like the way you said that. Actually, the rare studies is that,
Mm,
or the rare stories.
hmm
Yeah, I mean that's where you're really going to touch on the emotional side of things, and where, even if someone isn't experiencing that, but they can imagine what it would be like to have to experience that. Particularly when it comes to our children, right? When we're trying to that's our job is to protect our children, and if you can't even find a scientist or a doctor who has a solution, then really you are on your own. You've got to make it happen. You got to find it. So those are the stories I think you're that are going to inspire, like you said, inspired you. I think that's the
hmm
origin of this. As the origin of this story is that what inspired you was that mother and her drive and determination to find a solution, and and not maybe not always successful, but the part about it is it what it drives as far as um, inspiring people like yourself to
hmm
create organizations and businesses and do the science, do the research, and to make headway and bring it to light. I think that's really, I think that's very cool. I'm really, there's way more to this than I anticipated. So I'm really enjoying hearing you explain this. Now how about growth for you? What does that look like when at some
hmm
point, I mean, this is early days. I think you launched Qtropia in December of last year, correct?
Correct.
So what does growth look like for you? What's your, how are you phasing this out? What does the growth of this company look like?
So we've talked about a 2025 research roadmap, and I'm going to start putting flesh on those bones, and then we're just finalizing a proposal and figuring out what the right platform is to share it with the community. But that will happen. That share will happen next week. But we've been kind of telegraphing that we have a plan for 25, and obviously I wasn't sure how much the auction would bring in and whether it would even be successful. With 5 days left, we hadn't hit the minimum threshold yet,
Hmm.
and a lot of people were telling me it's over. This is the worst time to be doing anything in markets. Like just try again. And but I remembered that mom, and I go back to that inspiration candle and have to kind of relight it every now and then.
Yeah.
And so we powered through. And so we now that we know what our treasury is and we're also mindful of crypto markets and balancing like having minimal burn, but also getting stuff done quickly because sitting on things
Hmm.
and drip is not the answer. We got to get to some value inflection points. And this is my experience as an operator in biotech kind of coming to the fore. So we have we started with one project when we launched in December. The auction started on Feb 18th and ended on March 11th. But we actually received $100,000 grant from Bio, which is the platform where we launched, and that allowed us to start moving before the auction even started. And we were able to convert that 100K within 2 months. And this was, mind you, during Christmas and into the new year. And the auction started on February 18th. On February 5th, we had results from this pilot screen, and we selected this one rare disease that we thought was going to be emblematic of a whole group of related disorders. And so we thought we had this ability to scale up pretty quickly. And then we also had a patient family and a patient community that was behind it, that was ready to take the science and move on it. So all the pieces were aligned. And so within 2 months, we get two clinical candidates, two drug repurposing candidates for 100K, and we're filing IPNFTs or filing provisional patent on the discovery, and then we'll mint an IPNFT as sort of our first real Web3 uh, sort of native contract foundation. And but we're really excited now with our roadmap for 25 to scale up drug repurposing for metabolic diseases using this yeast platform. And so I've been talking about the number of trying to scale up to 60 this year. We're not going to get there in one shot, given sort of the size of the treasury and the uncertainty in markets and wanting to be judicious. But I'm rolling out a plan next week for scaling up to 10 diseases that are related to the original one that we just got results on. So we're going to 10x, and and then we should be able to accomplish that by and get the results by midsummer. So we'll move lightning speed, basically at the same speed we moved when we did one disease, because our system is just so well worked out that we just need capital to put fuel into it. Everything else is
Right.
just ready to grind. So we're really excited to parlay some of the auction proceeds into real results and show that we can also be scaling and getting cost savings as we're doing this and moving quickly. And then kind of forecasting through the rest of 25, it will depend on markets and so forth. And frankly, what the price of Sol is itself, since our
Right.
treasury is denominated in Sol. But if we get a nice tailwind, then we may be able to accelerate faster. But we still have a plan to get to sort of 60 diseases through the rest of the year. But we're going to be kind of going in this first wave of 10. Then we have a plan to scale up to do a wave of 20. And then we would try to knock out the last chunk, because we're also just getting more efficient with our process as we go. And we,
Hmm.
we, we want to make sure we don't almost drive too fast off the rails.
Right.
But yeah, we still set this target for scaling up to 60 metabolic diseases over this year, but we're going to take out this first chunk of 10, really prove that we can go from 1 to 10, and then start to share those results and start to have these organic N of one studies start, where parents just decide they're going to, in consultation with doctors, to try some of the recommendations that come out of our drug repurposing screens, and then actually put them to the test in kids.
Very cool. Very exciting. Hey. Yeah. Can you explain the auction process and how integral that is to this whole ecosystem that you've created? Just because the familiarity with that process and with blockchain may not be all that
So I
transparent
had
to
to learn
people.
kind of this stuff all myself, and
Yeah.
in truth deferred a lot to Bio in terms of their recommendations, because I wasn't the first bio DAO that they launched. There were several others, including Q Bio, Quantum Bio, Long COVID Bio. So I was watching their auctions and watching that process. So we did a couple of changes. We tried to sort of keep to the same template and sequence of events that those other auctions were done in. And I know I've gotten some complaints I've seen on X and other places about the auction and the bonding curve, and some people have complaints there. I don't have all the answers to that, but I can address some of it. But one way that so in terms of tokenomics, we were very comparable. If you look at the Curetopia tokenomics page compared to QBio and Long COVID, it's quite comparable in terms of the distribution. We made a change. Instead of launching on Ethereum, we launched on Solana.
Mm,
So we're the first bio DAO and DeFi to launch natively on Solana. And we're really excited about that. And actually was at the Solana Foundation last week in New York, and got to check out their wonderful space. And I'm really excited for their May Accelerate event. But yeah, so we chose a different chain to kind of launch on, but I think it's consistent with what you're seeing with Pump.Science today, announcing their move on Solana, and having community support longevity treatments, and back them as individual compound coins. So I think Solana just feels like it's the most performant chain. It's where the volume is, and just, I'm not picking winners or losers, but it just felt like Ethereum has a lot of drama going on. And so we changed that bit up. But yeah, in terms of the auction mechanics and bonding curve, I can't get into the details there because I'm not an expert. I learned enough just to sort of survive the auction. But I guess I would comment that it does appear that Bio is going to be launching a different, or has a new launch pad now that doesn't rely on, I think, on the same exact auction setup that we had been using. So I'm not sure if that gets deprecated or changed or what happens. That's really not my call.
hmm
At this point, I'm really interested in just in building. And but yes, I do know that people do have some, I think, complaints about the auction model. I think especially if they had been planning to sort of, frankly, dump the coin after the auction,
Right.
and were disappointed when we didn't release a lot of funds in the liquidity pool, because we told people the whole time that these are the treasury is for research. It's not to provide
Research. Yeah.
liquidity so you can dump your coin. So I
Right.
think there was some misunderstanding and some miscommunication, I think, there, but I think that just happens in Web3. But I think it's a learning experience. And as I said, my biggest challenge now is learning how to work with and understand the accents and the sort of the hidden messages, or the reading between the lines when it comes to kind of Web3 community.
Right. Right. Well, it's a brand new world. You're pioneering still, like this, the forest has hardly been cleared, there's still a lot to learn out there because the auction process is something it's ongoing too. It's not, you don't just stop there. You do it again and again, don't you?
So yeah, we have another allocation for another token sale. 10% supply has been set aside for quote unquote institutionals. But at this point, like a lot of founders, you're in fundraising mode. You do it, and then you go to executing mode, and
Right.
then you go
Right.
back to fundraising when you've done something with the money and you can get a better valuation. So that's kind of the formula that I have stuck with as a founder.
Right.
So at this point, especially because we're going to stay ultra lean, I don't need to hire anybody else full time. I can run this
Right.
with a group of consultants supporting me. Then we can stay super lean and figure out what our options are as the year goes
hmm
by.
And conceivably, every time you sort of, discover another rare disease that you want to do research on, that would be an opportunity to have another auction specifically for that.
Potentially. I mean, I want to be mindful of, like, yeah, I think we want to be focused more on platform approaches,
Right.
and knocking out multiple sort of programs at once. But I also want to be mindful of not just necessarily funding top of funnel stuff like discovery work, but
Right.
also potentially more later clinical stage, more mature programs, and helping
Right.
push them to the finish line.
Yeah.
So
Maybe a
sort of
happy balance in
diversifying,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
creating a little
Yeah.
bit of balance there. But in the beginning, I think, like, we have a focus in 25. We have a well vetted research plan. Definitely happy for the community to suggest things, but frankly, there isn't funding to support it. And I
Right.
think also there's something that you said about focus and execution. And then once we've done that, we've earned the right to scale.
Are you exploring traditional funding measures as well? Or are you
I mean, I've had great conversations with both crypto and non-crypto VCs, tech VCs that understand this, token networks. So I'm continuing those conversations. No institutionals, that are not Web3 native, I don't think participated in the auction as far as I know, but I don't know. Like, I don't know everyone's wallet address. But I think, yeah, I think ultimately we have a pretty diverse base of sort of Curetopia cures holders, and it's a dynamic, living thing. So hopefully, I would love there to be some organic price action where we can have
Hmm.
positive results, right? And
Hmm.
say we're moving down the field and not just starting things, but completing things. And then if that can justify, platform expansion, by all means. But I think let's sort of just my theory is let me just show you what I can do. Let me cook, and then we need to scale. We can get a bigger kitchen.
Right. Exactly. Bigger chicken, bigger kitchen, bigger appliances, the whole bit, right?
If you want a bigger chicken, you need a bigger kitchen.
Okay, so I can't ignore the fact that you are a doctor of philosophy, right? Is that correct?
Well, it's a PhD, but it's in molecular and cell biology, so I'm not sure how excited you were going to get there.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you for your leadership philosophies and how,
Mm.
as you're moving forward in this new company, Curetopia, how are you implementing your personal leadership and personal philosophies and values into this company?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this because I was, I have a set of values, I think, in life experiences and mentors, but I realized, I think I was listening to like Scott Bessent, the new Treasury Secretary, on the All In Pod, and he mentioned some of his mentors and people that he learned from, and I realized, wow, I sort of have a gap in my business leadership knowledge canon because he was quoting all these famous, and I know the names of the various great investors and such, but like, I had never read their great books on business or management or whatever, and
Right.
realizing I started to second guess myself. Well, my God, I've been missing all this knowledge because it sounds, and I've heard some of these expressions that have filtered down. But yeah, so I had a moment there where I thought maybe I need to spend a weekend reading the best business management canon, but just to see what values I can aspire to. But I think just in terms of my compass, I think I said it at the beginning. I have a very simple animating drive. I want to end rare diseases. This is what I've devoted my life to. And the why can trace back to this very specific moment in time, this very specific encounter with a very specific person. And the specificity of that is kind of, what I go back to. It's like it's
Right.
the root of the well and
Hmm.
the base of the well. And that's where I go back and draw inspiration. And so if anything, my values as a leader just come from channeling the pureness of the mission and why are we doing this,
Hmm.
and I, can I do it better? Have I done it well? All I know is I've attracted great teams around me and we've accomplished great things, and it's not because they like my sense of humor or like the way I dress. I think it must mean that I'm channeling this mission because I'm bringing these amazing people along with me to do really stressful things, and we could be
Yeah.
doing easier things. And so, yeah, so I definitely want to grow as a leader and know there's next levels to keep going, but I do feel I have a rock.
Well, it's very heart centered. That's my vibe. Is that it's very heart centered, and I think that's what's getting you through
Mm,
doing all the tough things. I mean,
totally.
that's how any of us do anything that's hard. Is when we're led by our heart. So I mean, the story you told was right out of the gate, and was obviously it's very meaningful to you, and I think that's your compassion is shining through all the time. You're I mean, not everybody's going to climb these kinds of mountains, and you're doing things. Not only are you doing, you're tackling something that's already rare. You're actually doing it in a very rare way. It's so
Right.
and
Right.
you're forging into landscapes that some people haven't gone yet. So I don't know. I think huge kudos for you for taking this on, and I've really enjoyed hearing where you're going with this. And yeah, I'm a fan already. I'm gonna be sticking close and seeing what you're
Excellent.
doing. And yeah, it's very exciting stuff. Um, do you have any inspiration or advice for somebody who's maybe in your shoes
Mm.
or looking to do something spectacular or has some sort of mission or passion for their life as to how to move forward and in what steps to take?
Yeah, it's funny. Someone just tweeted what I'm about to say, which
Hmm.
is never be afraid to say that thing to somebody, if you wanted to talk to a person at a conference and you're asking yourself, do I go, or do you send that cold email, or like the answer is always do that.
Yeah.
And as long as you lead with your passion, and and if if you're of the kind of person I'm thinking, then you can't help but lead with your passion, then you're going to be noticed. And when I was 16, I emailed a scientist with my dad's email account because I didn't have my own, and and like and then ended up kind of finding my first scientific mentor that way. And I just thought, what do I have to lose? So if I have anything to say to anybody, and that has led to, getting investments from people like Martin Shkreli, the notorious pharma bro, to people like Mark Cuban and Y Combinator and Novartis. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's cool. Wow.
that's a whole nother set of stories. But like, yeah,
Yeah, no kidding.
it's
That's like 3 or 4 more episodes.
that's the unplugged, really unplugged version.
That's great advice. I think that's important
Just send
because
the
you're right.
email. Do not hesitate. Just do it.
Just
You do
send
not
it.
put yourself out there. Your genuineness will shine through to that person, and even if it doesn't, you strike out that once. Just you never. It will pay back in spades. Just
Yeah.
do it.
Just light the spark, right? Yeah.
Light the spark.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that we haven't discussed? Anything you would like to share, or any other information you'd like to provide the audience with about what you're doing or what they can do, how they can get involved?
Yeah, thanks, Heath. I would say just check out curetopia.xyz, and our site is going to go through some expanding of content soon now that we're post auction, and a new project is coming online, and other pipeline prospects are developing. So you can just get kind of information centralized there. Find Curetopia on Telegram, find Curetopia on X. The handle is End Rare Diseases. I thought it was good to put the mission in the name. Plus, some
Amazing.
sneaky person took Curetopia, the handle, so I was left with no other choice.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Ethan. And it's been a pleasure to chat with you and to meet you. And yes, I'm going to stay in touch and keep track on what you do over the coming months and years.
Here, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, so that was pretty awesome. I did not know I was going to be talking about how Ethan is bringing biotech to the blockchain, but his passion for wanting to find cures for rare diseases and what brought him to utilizing the Web3 as a way to not only finance but distribute the information about his vision. It's certainly going to come with its share of challenges for him, but I don't know if anyone's going to be able to pull it off. I think it's going to be Ethan. So I look forward to hearing and seeing what he does in the coming weeks, months, years, and I hope you check him out. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned.